Amalei, now we start Yudalad Amid base. So David HaMelech responds, Mori b'malchus, we don't need a judgment in a court when it comes to a Mori b'malchus. And because he had spoken in such a negative way about David HaMelech, insulting the king, therefore it's not a capital case that has to be judged in a Jewish court. We can put him to death without a court. Now, here we have a whole discussion in the Rishonim whether or not you can really put a Morid B'Malchus to death without a court. So I'm going to quote to you here the opinion of the Ad Ramah. He says that David was explaining to Abigail that an important rule of procedure is waived in cases of sedition. In other capital cases, a guilty verdict may not be handed down on the day that the court proceedings commence. It can only be handed down on the next day. But in the case of a Morid B'Malchus, that's an exception. He could be judged and sentenced to death on the very same day. So when Abigail told David that capital cases may not be tried at night, what she meant to say was he cannot conclude the din at night. You have to wait to conclude the din until the next day. So even though it could be that during the day Novel was condemned to death, but we'd have to wait till the following morning to actually implement the death sentence, the capital sentence. So David responded that the exception to the rule is the case of Morid B'Malchus, and this procedure that we have to wait till the next day does not apply. That requirement doesn't apply. How could you possibly condemn my husband Novel to death as a Morid B'Malchus? Shol HaMelech is still alive. And in the eyes of the public, at least, he still retains his status as a Melech, and you don't have the status of a Melech. So therefore, my husband is not guilty. He's not rebelling against the king. Now, this is a machlokes here between David and Abigail about the status of David at the time that Shmuel was still alive. After all, David had already been anointed with Shemen HaMishcha by Shmuel, and that gave him the status of a Melech. Abigail argued that as long as Shaul was alive, he could not be a Melech. Amar la, ubaruch tamechu brucha at. He was very taken by her argument, and he was so impressed that he blessed her. And he said to her, Baruch Tamech, your logic should be blessed. Ubruchat, and you should be blessed. Asher, what is the next word? It's a little bit erased. Asher Kilisini. Kilisini, I think it should say. Is that what it says in your? Kilisini. Kilisini hayom hazeh mibo bidamin. And you have saved me from coming into two bloods. So one blood is shvichas damim for killing, putting to death an innocent man, Novel. Because as we said, that Novel L'Shitasa was not a Morid B'Malchus, it was based on the Shita of Abigail, because Shaul was still a Melech. Well, what's damim in plural? Dam tarte mach, what's the second dam? And this is going to be the dam nidus, because you remember that Abigail had sent a stain of dam to David HaMelech. Now, the next Gemara that we're about to learn, I have to admit, is beyond my. I'm going to translate it. And on one level, I could comprehend it, but it's a shocker root of it. And basically, what's going to happen here is that David HaMelech is going to be tempted to have a relationship with Abigail, who's married to Novel. But because of Dam Nida, that's why he's not going to have this relationship. So what's the story? Why was David tempted to have a relationship with Abigail? Elamalamed, Shegilsa es Shoka, she exposed her thigh, V'holach le'ura gimel parsos. Now this is wild. David HaMelech is 3 parsos, if I'm not mistaken, a parsa is 2,000 amma, times 3, a distance, and somehow the light from her thigh traveled all the way to David HaMelech, and such he had a burning desire to have a relationship with her. Omar Allah Hashmi'ini Li, and he asked her to please comply and have this relationship. And this is absolutely shakaru because she was married. So we're going to have to see what's going on. Now, there's a whole machlokas here whether Abigail, when she exposed her thigh, was it deliberate or the wind blew her skirt or something? We're not exactly sure. I mean, again, Abigail is an Aviyah, and she's married, and she's exposing her thigh. I mean, the whole thing makes no sense. And that David would want to have a relationship with a married woman. In other words, if you would have a relationship with me, then you're going to have a stumbling block. Now, obviously, a stumbling block here in this context should mean having a relationship with a married woman. And that would be a commission of a very severe sin, goes without saying. But the Gemara wants to say that there's another implicit sin here, because the word zos is redundant. It could have said lo tehelecha. What's zos? Zos meaning michal deikachrini, achriti. In other words, that there's going to be another case which, David, you're going to be in trouble for a similar kind of avera. So you better watch out. Okay, now, what she did was she told David HaMelech that she was in nida. Anyway, now we get to the postscript, so to speak, of this entire episode. And now that David HaMelech decides not to put Novel to death, he spares his life. Abigail blesses him, and the soul of my master shall be bound in the bond of life. Ki havis miftara minei omrole. When she was about to take leave from David, she said to him, "V'heitev Hashem ladoni v'zacharta es hamasecha," that you will remember your handmaid. And Chazal interpret this to mean that if and when David Novel, my husband, die, David, you'll remember me and marry me. Imagine a married woman saying this to a man. Is an idiomatic phrase. While a woman talks, she spins fibers to make yarn. She does things, she multitasks. While she's making fibers, she engages you in conversation. So Abigail is talking about her husband, and then she engages David in conversation about the relationship between herself and him. Another idiomatic phrase, Rav Nachman had in mind a goose stoops as it goes, but his eyes peer afar. In other words, a goose looks down, but its eyes look up to heaven, meaning towards the future. So Abigail, it appears that she's looking towards the now and trying to save her husband Novel from David, but yet, in truth, she's already looking forward to the time after her husband would die. Then we get to Chulda. How do we know the Chulda was an Aviv? T'chsiv vayelech chilkiyo hakohen v'achikam v'achbar. And then it says v'shafan v'asaya el Chulda Nevi'im. So all these people are coming to Chulda HaNevi'im, and they're all coming to ask Chulda for some prophecy. So the Gemara says that this was not right. Chulda was a student, a disciple of Yirmiyahu HaNavi, and Yirmiyahu HaNavi was alive at this time. So the fact that she would prophesy and offer her service as a prophetess, and all these greats who were waiting online, Chilkiel the priest, Achikam, Achbar, and Shafan and Asiya, that seems to be a violation. Welcome to Koi Yirmiyah, right? Just like you're not allowed to pass in a shayla in front of your Rebbe, you're not allowed to give answers to questions based on prophecy when your Rebbe, meaning Yirmiyah, is a lot. How could a Neviah do this? This would be an insult to Yirmiyahu. He was the prophet of that generation. Amri Bey Rav Mishmei the Rav. So I guess Bey Rav is the two students in the yeshiva of Rav, and they said in the name of their Rebbe Rav, Chulda Krovas Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu would not be insulted. Why? Because Chulda was a relative of Yirmiyahu. The law of Imakra, he would not object to her prophesying. Okay, later on the Gemara is going to prove that Chulda and Yirmiyah were both descendants of Rachel. He quotes here in the footnote, Ben Yehoyada, if she had a nevuah that was initiated by God, so Kovesh as Novi Akovesh's Rosas Chayv Misa, she could not suppress the prophecy. So the Ben Yehoyada says that the Gemara is asking, is it possible that God would have communicated with his prophets in a way that really it's not right to be an insult and undermining to the preeminent prophet of that generation to prophesy in his lifetime? So really, the Gemara is questioning Chulda's initiative. Apparently, she initiated the nevuah. In other words, Hashem responded to her initiative. Why would she initiate a nevuah if Yirmiyahu is still alive? So the answer is because they were relatives. Yeah, Dave.
I thought in this time there were many prophets. I didn't know there were only a few who were preeminent who prophesied. I thought anybody who was trained and.
So there are two different categories of prophets. There's a prophet that gets a private prophecy, and then there's a prophet that has to transmit that prophecy on behalf of Klal Yisrael. And it seems that these people who are waiting online to see Chulda and get the answer from prophecy, they were representatives as leaders of Klal Yisrael. So that would be a different kind of a nevuah. And there were very few of those, Nevi'im, 48 and 7, who were granted nevuah that had to be transmitted to respond to address the questions of the day meaning of Klal Yisrael. The Gemara says, by the way, I use the word initiate prophecy. He says in the name of Ben Yehoyada, it wasn't that she initiated prophecy, but that she actively prepared for prophecy. Okay, it's pretty much the same. Okay, you justified Chulda. She wouldn't be undermining a cousin of hers by the name of Yirmiyah because they had a good relationship and he wouldn't be mocked. But how could it be that Yochia, the king, would actually invoke the nevuah of Chulda, and skip over the nevuah of Yirmiyah? Why didn't he come to confer with Yirmiyah? Amri Debei Rabbi Shila. This is a difficult Gemara. This is like, name the course, choose your prophet. 1.1. So when the king of Israel needs an answer to a question on behalf of Klal Yisrael, obviously his vested interest is to try to get the most compassionate answer that he can. Now, the answer has to be from God. So whether it comes through Chulda or whether it comes through Yirmiyah, it's going to be the same answer. So what does the Gemara mean that Yoshia Melech went to seek out Chulda so that she would be more compassionate? Well, what does that mean? He quotes the Marsha. He says, not to say that Chulda would dissemble and report bad tidings as good tidings, no, that she would transform the tidings. A prophet is forbidden to alter the communication he or she receives in any way. Rather, The mercy of a prophetess is manifest after a distressing message is received. Unlike her male counterpart, she will exert every ounce of her strength to pray so that the decree of misfortune should be changed from evil to good. Wow. I mean, to say that Huldah would be greater in prayer than Yirmiyahu and Novi, I mean, that's a mouthful. But maybe what it means is that Yirmiyahu realized in some part of his heart that if it was a bad tidings, because the Jewish people would deserve it, he was very much hands-on in the Jewish people. So he wouldn't have a full-fledged, prayer the way that she would have. I don't know. Rabbi Yochanan Omar, Yirmiyahu lo havi hasam shahalach lahachzas hashvatim. There's another answer, says Rabbi Yochanan. The reason why Yoshio went to Chulda, not to Yirmiyahu, is because Yirmiyahu was not available. He went to retrieve the 10 tribes of Israel who had broken from the house of David under Yeravam. They created their own kingdom, and they were exiled from Israel by Sancheir Melech Ashur. This took place 130 years before Churba Bayis Rishon. And how do we know for sure that Yirmiyahu was able to bring back the 10 lost tribes? It says in Yechezkel Hanavi, Mocher el hamimkar lo yosh, which literally translates as, for the seller shall not return to the sale. So what does that mean? So the Gemara asks the following rhetorical question. Usually when Yovel comes, the 50th year, the Jubilee year, then the sale is returned. And as the karka, the real estate that I sold, goes back, reverts to its original owner. So the Gemara asks, Efshar Yovel Botel. Could it be that what's going on when it says the seller shall not return to the sale, that there's no Yovel? And that means that the conditions for Yovel are non-existent. After Yovel Botel, the Navi Misnabe Olav Shei Botel. We take this literally. It sounds like the Navi is telling us that Yovel will be Botel. Yovel was already Botel. Just 1 second. Let me just read it again. Right. It means that the Yovel law was already disqualified. I guess because the people already were exiled, and now the prophet is prophesying that it will be Batel in the future. It already was Batel. Ela Malamichi Yirmiach 0. That even though at one point most of Klal Yisrael, 10 out of 12 tribes, were exiled, which would mean Bitel Ayovel, because it's Ein Rov Yoshvel Leo, and nevertheless, why is Yirmiyah prophesizing that it will become Batel again? Because in the meantime, the observance and the validity of Yovel was reinstated, because at some point, Yirmiyah brought back the 10 tribes. Yoshia ben Amotz, Molach Aleim, ben Ammon, Molach Aleim, and now Yirmiyah returns with the 10 tribes, and Yoshia, we have a whole kina on Yom Kippur about on Tisha B'Av, about Yoshia. In any event, Yoshia now ruled over the entire nation of Israel. The Ksiv. Vayomer Mohat Sion Halaz Asher Niroa Vayomer Elav Anshei Ha'ir HaKever Ish Elohim Asher Ba Yehuda Vayikra Es Hadvarma El Asher Asisa Ala Mizbeach Beis El. And Yoshia declared, "What marker is this that I see?" They used to put a marker over a grave to indicate that the Kohanim should stay away because there's a corpse buried there. So the men of the city told Yoshia, it is the tomb or the burial place of the man of God who came from Judah and proclaimed these things that you have done upon the altar of Beis El. So what is going on here? There's a Mizbeach in Beis El. V'chimat tivo shel Yoshio al Mizbeach with Beis El. Now, what connection is there between Yoshio and the altar in Beis El? I mean, Beis El was in the area of the 10 tribes. From the fact that the pasuk indicates that a man of God came from Judah and proclaimed the things he'd done upon the altar of Beis El, means that the kingdom of the 10 tribes was restored. Rav Nachman Omer Yehocha, I have a different source from which I can derive that Yoshio brought, or during the time of Yoshio, when Yirmiyahu brought back the 10 tribes, as the pasuk says, Gam Yudah Shas Chatzir Loch Bishuvi Shvus Ami. Also, Judah, there is a harvest appointed for you when I return the captivity of my people. Pasuk in Oshaya. So Judah is a reference to Yoshio, because he was Melech Yehuda. And the word Ktsir connotes strength and greatness. And the pasuk is alluding to the greatness appointed for Yoshia, who will rule over the Aseres Hashvatim when they return from captivity. And how do we know that Esther was a Neviah? Esther, that Siv, Bayom HaShlishi, Tilvash Esther Malchus. So what is this Malchus? It should have said Big Day Malchus. Remember we had this tomorrow on Amid Aleph. Big Day Malchus Mipoile El Shal Levachata Ruach HaKodesh. She was clothed in Ruach HaKodesh. Ksiv Hacha Vatilvash, Uksiv Hasam. And there with regard to Amasai, it says, Ruach Lavsha Es Amasai. And that's a pasuk in Divrei Yomi. Rav Nachman, Lo Ya Yehirusa L'Nashi. I'm going to give you examples of 2 women that were guilty of Yuara. Yuara means Gaiva. Hartin Noshin Yehira and Havi Sanyan Shmayahu. Shmayahu means their names. They were given repulsive names because they were guilty of Yura. And who are these 2 ladies that had these repulsive names? Kadashma Ziburta. So Dvora means a bee. The Chadashma Karkushta. And Chulda means a weasel. Like we don't like these creatures. Now, Ziburta Ksibba, why was she called Ziburta, Dvora, a bee? Because it says regarding of a Tishlach Vatikrol of Baruch, she insisted that Baruch come and see her. The ilu lo azl gabe, and the respect would require that she would go to see Baruch. He was the shofet. And Karkushta by him. Why was Chulda called a weasel? What was she guilty of? It says regarding her, Imrula Ish, Lo Omra Imrula Melech. See. Oh, so we're referring to Yoshia. So Yoshia was not an Ish, he was a Melech. It was a bit of a chutzpah on her part that she called him an Ish. like sometimes you call somebody by a nickname, when they're, the most prominent people in the whole neighborhood, in the whole nation. Omer Rav Nachman, Chulda mipnei bonav shel Yehoshua hoisa. Chulda was from the lineage of Yoshua. How do I know this? From a Gzeret Shava. So it says in Sefer Malachim, it says Ben Charchas, Chulda. Getting confused here. Ben Charchas. So I'm going to read the whole passage. Let's see, maybe we'll shed a light on this. I guess we're talking about this. This is the husband of Chulda. Or let's see. Vayelech Chilkiyahu HaKohen Vachikav V'Achbar V'Shafan V'Asiya El Chulda Nevir Eshes Shalom Ben Tikva Ben Charchas Shomer Habgod. Do you see this? We're talking about Eshes. You see that word Eshes means she's the wife of. So she's the wife of an entire lineage that traces back to Charchas. Okay. Uksiv Hasam and a pasuk in Shoftim, and there it says Besimnas Cheres, again the same word Cheres. We're now connecting Yoshua with Chulda, because in this last pasuk it's a reference to Yoshua. Eisvei Rav Eina Sabel Rav Nachman Shmona Neviim Vehem Kohanim Yotzu Mirachav Hazona. So fascinating. It's called a zona. Again, there's a whole machlokas what the word zona means. But there is one shita that says zona means she was selling mizonos, but she wasn't a prostitute. In any event, it's just pretty amazing. And this Rachav, right, that's when Kalev and Yoshua went to see Rachav. I mean, they didn't know her at that point, but that's where they hid when they came to spy. And from this woman named Rachav, she must have been a great woman. She had 8 prophets that descended from her, and they were all Kohanim. The Eluhem, and here's the list of 8: Neria, Baruch, Sraya, Machseah, Yirmiyah, Chilkiah, and Chanamel Vishalum. If you count it up, you'll get to number 8. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Af Chulda Neviim Mipnei Bonei Shel Rachav Hazona. Now, one of the children of Rachav, one of the descendants, is Yirmiyah. And now Rabbi Yehuda is saying that Chulda Neviah was also a descendant of Rachav, which would make her into a relative of Yirmiyah. Correct? Didn't we say before that she was related to Yirmiyah? Oh, right. Remember that Chulda was giving prophecy during the lifetime of Yirmiyah. But the answer is she was related to you because they were both descendants of Rachav. And how do I know, asks Rabbi Yehuda, that Chulda was a descendant of Rachav Anaviyah, Rachav Azona? Tivhach, it says here, regarding Chulda, Ben Tikva. Ben Tikva. Uksiv Hasam. And we have Pasuk in Yoshua, and it says, as Tikvas Ut Hashanu. So we're making Gzeret Shava. Just one second. This is a kasha on Rav Nachman. Why is it a kasha on Rav Nachman? Rav Nachman says that Chulda was Mibnei Banav Shel Yoshua. And here we're proving that she was Mibnei Banav of Rachav. You see, the Gemara doesn't know yet that Yoshua married Rachel. Amalei Eina Saba v'Amalei Pischa Uchma. Eino the elder or black vessel. Mineu minachtis tayim shmaita. The Igaira Vinaspa Yoshua, Rachel converted, and then Yoshua married her. So it makes sense that Huldah was a descendant of both Yoshua and Rachel, because Yoshua married Rachel. So the Gemara asks, Yoshua, you're assuming that Yoshua had children. Oksiv nun beno Yoshua beno. So when the Tanakh gives you the lineage of Ephraim, it ends with Yoshua. It says nun, and then it says Yoshua, but it doesn't tell you who came after Yoshua. So the Gemara answers, B'nei lo havile, that lineage is going through the sons, but B'nasan havile, but he actually did have daughters. And on the top here of Tezvav, Bishlema inu mefarshim. Okay. All right, so this is what we'll leave for tomorrow on the top of Daf Tezvav and Al.